Hello and welcome. I'm John with Internetic, and today we'll be talking about C2 and ransomware. This video is a primer for the next video where I'll be actually showing C2 and ransomware in action. I don't want to take the time to explain all the intricacies and the terminology in that video because it'll take the video way too long, so we'll have this 101 breakout so we can kind of go into the basics of it. So let's dive in. It's going to be a bit technical, but I'll try to keep it understandable and high level. We're looking at a full attack. This means we won't be talking about just the phishing email or the dropper or the rat. We're looking at a full kill chain. We're looking at how the phishing email gains access, how the dropper works, how the Trojan gets in, data exfiltration, and the ransomware. Not all of these are involved in every attack, but some combination of these usually are. So let's dive in. So for this, we're going to have two players in our little act here. So the victim and our attacker. Attacker has a hoodie, of course, as per tradition. So stage 0 is phishing. Some attacks will call this stage 1 or something else. I just call it stage 0 because at this point, the attack actually hasn't begun yet. This is where they've spread out their thing, spread out these emails and said, what can I get? This is actually where most companies and people make a mistake where they say, I'm too small for this thing to happen to me, or they wouldn't target my company. That's not right. There's probably a better word for this, but they're not target. In most cases, the attackers aren't going to target you or any individual or any company. There are exceptions to that where there's a high value company or activism or something like that where they actually will target a specific person or group. But in 99% of the cases, they send out these emails. They send out 5 million emails and see what bites. Now, in this case, our attacker sent out a bunch of emails that look like an Amazon receipt, and he just sees, who can I get with this? Well, this is the actual email. This is a legit mail I created for this purpose. Kind of what we call a legit email I created for this purpose. I pulled it to make this. I actually grabbed an Amazon email, and I tweaked it a little bit. So this will be shown in the next video where we show how the attack plays out. So things to note on this is this has not come from Amazon. You may not notice it, but that's actually an ARN, not AM. Depending on your font and your computer size and how far away from it you are and how good your vision is, you may not notice that at a glance. That is a common trick for phishing and for attackers. And again, down here, we can see it's a download book link, and it goes to Arnazon, not Amazon. So it goes to another site and as an executable. As a good rule of thumb, don't download executables and run them from the internet unless it's very specifically, it comes from that site. Like Autodesk or Microsoft or whoever you work with. Even then, I'd be very suspicious. If you can get like the MD5 hash would be a good one, or SHA-1 hash to verify that file looks like it should. But as a good rule, don't trust these. I actually created this one with a digital book, My Enormous Penis. One, made me giggle, and two, it is to get someone to download and run this file. It's kind of a, hey, look, what is this? And when they open it, it does something. So not only am I trying to trick them with the phishing email, I'm trying to draw them in. So the phishing email goes out to 1 million, 5 million, I don't know, whoever. It costs dollars to send these things out, and we send them to us, everyone in some sort of email chain we can get, usually through another compromise or through a compromised database for a known, for a larger site or for a company. This actually happens fairly commonly for things like for dating sites or for trying to what I'm thinking for now, for commercial sites. So like Equifax, that was a big one where their database was compromised, so they didn't lose like personal data, like social security numbers and credit cards, but did lose email addresses and physical addresses. So the attacker can just go through and spam everyone's email addresses, which is God knows how many, and send these things and see who they can get. So the dropper. The stage 0 was where it's trying to get you to download the file. The dropper is a smaller file. So it's actually a file that opens other files for me. In this case, the dropper is a very small 100K file, 100 kilobyte file. It opens and downloads very easily. It does not look dangerous. It looks very innocuous. And because then it goes out and pulls down 2 other files. So you see, we download from the web, we download our file, and it downloads a PDF, and it goes over to our malware server and downloads the actual payload, our Trojan. So why it does this is the Trojan is usually actually a fairly large file. It can be fairly small for a very basic one, but they usually range about 10 megabyte size, where that's big enough for someone to go, what is that? Also, it's usually gets detected by an antivirus or something like that. With a dropper, you can put in tools or techniques and methods to download that file and change it or to hide it in a way that AV can't find it and to hide it from the user and take rights because of that user. It also helps to obfuscate or hide what we're actually doing. So when you download this file, instead of doing nothing or doing something weird, it actually does open a PDF of the song My Enormous Penis. So that actually is a legit song. So when you open this file, you go, hey, that's kind of funny. You don't realize that there is a program running background, this process started where it actually is infecting your computer with a Trojan. And in my, as the attacker's view, I'm kind of hoping you'll share this as well. Because you go, this is funny, let me share this out to some other people. So this is where a Trojan comes into play. A RAT, or Remote Access Trojan, is part of a C2 framework. C2 is command and control. What this does, as soon as this computer's infected, on the left, you can see now we have a skull here. For our laptop is now in a bad time, and it's our victim here. It sends out a hello to our command and control server for the bad guy, for the attacker. It says, hey, I'm here. It's announcing its presence and it's added to the sessions or the logs of this C2 server so it knows it has another victim. So once it starts doing that, it starts what we call beaconing. So it kind of hard to get your head around sometimes. For firewalls, they block inbound traffic. They can block outbound traffic as well, but you have to allow some outbound traffic for things to work. So things like for web, if you're going to Google or to wherever you're going, it has to allow that outbound traffic. So in almost every case, your Trojan will go out on a well-known port, such as web or DNS, which has to be always allowed out. But it does not allow it back in. It's a one-way door. So if your computer is infected, it will send out the request saying, do you have work for me? And that server will have a little thing there, like a kind of flag or a sign going, I got nothing for you. Go away. And it will keep beaconing. It will keep sending out requests out every X many minutes, seconds, days, hours, weeks, depending on how you want to avoid detection. So the longer a beacon time is, the harder it is to detect it. If you're beaconing every second, the attacker can do more work in that period, but it's harder, it's easier to detect. If make it go out for a week, the attacker can do less work, but it's almost impossible to detect. So something to kind of remember in this is the beacon, when that beacon goes from the infected computer to the C2 server, that's the only time it takes requests or some sort of work action. So when it's just sitting there, nothing happens until the beacon comes out and that server tells it to do something. So there is a delay there. So what does a RAT used for? Generally, recon, exfiltration, and control. It's kind of flow into a kind of a process here. Control is when they get control of your computer. Something time to remember with this, I'm trying to form this style a little better. The weird thing people don't realize, and the creepy thing of this, is most people say, they got control, they're going to do something right now. That's not statistically accurate. What we've seen is that most of the time, when you're infected with a C2 rat like this, you don't know it. The only time you realize this, in most cases, is when this rat has taken action of some sort, usually ransomware. The average time for that to happen is about 90 days. So that's something to think about for a second there. When this thing infects your computer, the average time for it to take action is 90 days. That means that person, that attacker, has been in your system for 90 days. Granted, this attack can be as short as about 4 hours, is what we've seen in some cases, or in many cases, where from time of compromise to ransomware deployment, 4 hours. But in most cases, it actually hangs out for much longer time, to the point where it's not so much that's being detected, that the attacker has actually run their payload and started their ransomware, and that counts as detection as well. So these little things will hang out for a very long time, doing stuff in the background that you don't know is doing it. Particularly start with their control. They're going to take over your computer. They're not going to like actually move your mouse around and start screwing with it because that's obvious and overt. They will start moving around the background, kind of like a snake or a little shadow there. So lateral movement is where they won't necessarily, as an attacker, I would want to get a server and get something high value and amazing. Most cases, that does not happen. We will get someone's endpoint, someone's laptop or desktop that's just hanging out. Could be anyone. So what we do is we move from that computer. We just get whatever we can get and work from there. So lateral movement is where we take this person's computer and we try to jump from that computer over to a server or over to someone who has more privileges, jumping from an HR computer to an administrator's computer or someone who's got higher rights, so we can kind of leverage that to go something bigger. We're going for the bigger game. Controls is also allows to install ransomware. We can use it to hack other systems. So we can, like along the lines of activism, which is actually fairly common in this area, where they will infect a computer and try to do something to take action, like a takedown a network, to take down power, water systems, hospitals. We're actually seeing this a great deal right now with the Russian-Ukraine war. Cybersecurity is playing a major part in that conflict, and we saw the same sort of thing in Iran and Iraq with the Operation Desert Storm and Enduring Freedom and a couple others. Desert Storm is especially, there's some good books on this. Cybersecurity or cyber attacks played a huge role in that, where before America landed troops in Iraq, they actually had turned off a lot of their surface-to-air missiles using these cyber attacks. So a lot of the generals were kind of like, it's just a bunch of nerds doing nothing. Who cares? When the aircraft flew into Iraq, a lot of their missile sites were already disabled. So like you can have a $50 million missile site, but if it's turned off, it doesn't do you a bit of good. So you can use that for cyber attacks and for activism. It's used also for exfiltration. So when they get into your system, they want to get as much bang for the buck as you can. Ransomware is unfortunately usually the end game. It's not like they start at ransomware. It's like, oh, we're done here. Ransomware is usually when they're trying to get the last little bit out of you. So they'll get in and they'll take your passwords, credentials, anything that they can use to get to other systems, or to get into bank details, into accounts, into your personal stuff, into email accounts, into mail servers. Anything can let them spread further and get more access, or jump from your systems to someone else. We've seen this a number of times, where it was called a business email compromise, where an attacker got into someone's mail server or got into someone's mail account, like an accounting mail account, and they would jump into the conversation and say, hey, the bank details that we sent you are wrong, send it over here, and then get, in some cases, millions of dollars. So they have you wire transfer the money to the wrong place. Like you sent your customer an invoice, and then the attacker jumps in that conversation and says, hey, that went to the wrong place, send it here, and you lose that money out. Insurance takes a very dim view of that. So they want to get in and grab anything they can. Proprietary files, especially if they can get anything that like source code or drawings, like engineering drawings, or anything that is hard to reproduce or is confidential, they very much want that, because that's pure money for them. They can sell it, or in many cases, as you see next, they will blackmail you with it. If you don't give us $1 million, we will spread your confidential information across the world. Or they will blackmail you with just other stuff. If they get on your computer, they will find anything that's personal to you, say nudes or work files or conversations with a mistress or anything that we want to keep secret. Hopefully you're not doing it on your work computer, but these do affect just your work computer. These will affect personal computers as well. But anything that they can find about you to use to leverage you to get more money from you in some way. So they will straight up blackmail you. And kind of recon is the first step for these guys. Is when they get in, they don't necessarily know whose system they're in. They know they infected the computer and it's called home to them. They're like, we don't know what this is yet, so they need to look at first, who owns this system? Why do we care what it is? What is this system? Is it an accounting computer? Is it a PLC controller? Is it a nuclear power plant? A hospital server? Is it something on the space station? They have no idea until they start doing recon, like, what do we got here? Is there anything important on the system? Anything valuable? Where is it physically? This work we come to play with activism. If they can get a server in Ukraine or in Russia or an endpoint of some sort, they want to know where is the thing physically. So is it something we can attack, or is it something that's useful? Because what we see a lot of times with, especially with Russian ransomware and extortion efforts, they will not target things that are in Russia. So they specifically look for what language is the computer talking before they do anything, because they can attack American citizens pretty much with impunity. They accidentally attack someone in their own country, the government takes a dim view of that. So they want to know, what is this thing? Where is this thing? What can we do with it? Can we work out from recon to exfiltration and control? And so our stage 3 is ransomware. So as we can see here, our compromised endpoint or our laptop here is calling out to the server and saying, to the bad guy's server, and saying, "You got work for me?" Because like, "You got work for me?" And the server says, "Okay, yeah, I got something for you. Run this file." This is actually, in this little case here, this is a ransomware encryptor. And then you can see it encrypts it. So this usually is at the end game of this, where they've gotten everything in one out of you. Now they're trying to get every little bit. So it becomes a very bad day for our victim here, where they're doing their work, and all of a sudden a big red screen pops up on the screen, says flashing letter, says, "Ransomware, your files are encrypted. You got to pay us a lot of money." So as part of the recon process for these people, they will try to figure out how big a company you are. So they actually do tailor their demands to how big you are. If you're a mom and pop shop, they're not going to ask you for $5 million. You can't pay that. They actually will look at how big a company you are, say, and they actually have, in some cases, have looked at your insurance rates. If they can get access to, say, a mom and pop shop, especially, they probably only have like 1 or 2 computers. One gets infected, they might see your insurance forms, your tax forms, things like that. Say, we know this mom and pop shop makes $100,000 a year. Their cybersecurity insurance covers $20,000. We'll ask for $20,000. This is not like a theoretical. This does happen, and we've read about cases where this has happened. So they will actually try to target like a bigger company the same way. You have a big company and say, "Okay, we have a large-scale multinational company here. We can ask for more. How much is their insurance worth? How much are their files worth? How much is their downtime worth to make it hurt, but make it not destroy the company so we can get money?" So a bit of detection on this. So C2, command and control detection, is almost never works to detect it based on a fingerprint. What this means is most antivirus and prevention methods look by a file structure. It has a word in it. It has something that is obvious that you can say, like a fingerprint, and say, this is always there. This thing is always in every one of these files or in every one of these packets. With ransomware in C2, these are very polymorphic, meaning that they commonly change their structure. They're usually encrypted in a high-level encryption. They change how the system works itself. It self-modifies and mutates so that it's not easily detectable. So rather than detecting based on a fingerprint or it looking like a car, like, okay, that's a car because it looks like a car every time. Doesn't matter what color it is or what it is, it always looks like a car. But they don't look at that. They look at behavior of this thing. So they, instead of looking at, does it look like ransom, or does it match its fingerprint, I should say, does it use beaconing? Because for the C2 framework and for the ransomware doesn't actually care. For the command and control structure, it has to call home to get those commands back to itself. If it just sits there and does nothing, they may as well not be infected or compromised. It's just sitting there. You can just use ransomware for that, and actually that is not uncommon for them to spray out ransomware and see what they get. But for bigger game or just for more in depth, they will use C2 and then ransomware. So when your computer beacons out to the server, they usually beacon out in a predictable pattern. Depending on how busy the attacker is, it could be every 10 seconds, every minute, every hour, every 24 hours, whatever. So in this case, we can see, as our example here, this one's beaconing out every 10 minutes. So at 110, at 120, at 130, 140. It's so we can actually use something like Zeek or Rita to monitor. We're not looking at the contents of the packets, but we're looking at the connections. So we see this computer is talking to this computer every 10 minutes, and it does it in a very predictable pattern. So in a an hour, we see it contact them every every 6 times, give or take, depending on skew and stuff like that. So we see this computer talk to this computer every 10 minutes, 6 times an hour, predictably. That's as a sure sign of a beacon and compromise. It's actually harder to detect. As far as a scale of things, I'm trying to think how to describe it better. So there are a lot of systems out there to detect bad guys doing bad things. Your antivirus, your web filters, your DNS filters, your firewalls, everything out there. On that scale of detection, detecting beacons is fairly hard to do just because of the amount of packets that you have to track to get something meaningful out of it. For a large scale company, this is very much worth it because the loss you can take is very high. For a smaller company, your computer could be destroyed or out of action for whatever reason, and you're like, I don't care, we're still working. So it's not as big a deal for you. Once you get over a certain size, you do want this sort of detection in place to prevent it, especially for compliance issues. That's where huge fines come into place. Is if the C2 or the rat or the Trojan gets into your computer and they pull out HIPAA files, or FERPA files, like HIPAA is hospitals and doctor's office. FERPA is student or academic, or they pull out Sarbanes-Oxley, like bank or credit card details. So not only are you being hit by the extortion, but also government fines that can rate often much higher than the extortion. In some cases, we've seen HIPAA fines be $100,000 per instance. That doesn't mean for this attack. That means per record lost. $100,000 per record lost. So if it's your large hospital, that will range in the millions extremely quickly. So that's when you really want this sort of beacon detection in place. So on the right side, actually, this is a legit beacon. This is where I took my own test server and I set up this Trojan on it, and you can see the beacon going out. I put it in verbose mode, so you can see my infected computer sending out a check-in message to this endpoint, to the command and control server, and it says, I got nothing for you. Nothing. Idle command received, doing nothing. In this case, I actually have it set for a very short period for its beacon. Normally, you'd want to be a lot higher because it makes it harder to detect. In this case, I already know it's there because I installed it. So I'm just playing around and working with it. So this actually has an example of what's called skew. So in beaconing, they will normally beacon, say, every minute. But to kind of throw off attacker or throw off the offender, let's say, you can skew that one way or the other. You can tell it, I want you to beacon every minute, give or take 10 seconds one way or the other. And it just helps you detect, or it helps prevent detection from someone like me trying to figure out, is there a beacon out there? Because it kind of screws the numbers. The flip of that is the more information I can gather, so the longer period of information I can download, is the more likely I can average that out and take that skew out. So if they're beaconing every minute and I can get 24 hours of log information, that little bit 5-second, 10-second skew is not going to matter. It's going to be like give or take the same. It's going to be 60 beacons per minute, give or take, no matter what. I can be like 59, 58, 60, 61, 63. If I see that straight line across there, I'm like, that's a beacon. Something is going on in that computer we need to investigate. They can turn their beacon into a much longer time. So if they set it for like a week, that's going to be hard to detect. Detecting one packet going to one server once a week through everything else is going to be nearly impossible. The problem with that is then they can't do as much work because they can only send one command back and forth for that period. So that's how you detect a command and control framework. So you can see here more of an example of that. So between midnight and 1 a.m., 10 packets. Between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., 10 packets. You can go down, and with proper detection, you can detect that. Prevention of this. Unfortunately, in many cases, we end up on the detection side rather than the prevention side. Prevention really starts and ends with people. With viruses and Trojans and ransomware, these things don't just happen. They don't just pop out of nowhere. And they don't. It's very rare for an attack to be so complex and so directed that they actually legit hack you. In almost every case, greater than 90% of attacks require the user to do something. So it's pretty rare that they just go, yeah, we got into your computer and infected it with no action of yours. You really only see that with what's called APTs, Advanced Persistent Threats. So nation states, North Korea, China, Russia, things of that nature. Whereas a state-funded, state-sponsored attack for your normal run-of-the-mill stuff, is unfortunate to say, for your criminal gangs, they do not attack a specific person and hack the computer. They send us out and they hope someone clicks on it. So greater than 9% of the attacks require someone to click or to download and click this file. So that is really your first line. Your last line is to be aware, to be suspicious, to be vigilant, and watching for anything that looks weird in these emails or anything that's your computer behaving weird or is download looking weird. Anything that looks odd, just don't trust it. It's good to contact someone and go, hey, this looks weird to me. I want a second eyes on this to be sure. Don't run executables. That's kind of a weird thing to say because I can't just blanket say don't run executables because sometimes you have to. You're installing Office 365 or Outlook or an Autodesk product or something along those lines where if you're installing software, you need to download an executable. But be very suspicious of anything's executable. So an exe file. Whenever you see one of those, crank your suspicion to 11. Like, say suspicious. When we see one of those, you go, I am paranoid now. I really have to keep an eye on this. Technology solutions are great. There are a lot of solutions out there that help with this. So firewalls, antivirus, web filters, DNS filters, ring fencing. There are a whole slew of things that do help with this. But I always come back to starts and ends with people. So technology is great. I work for an IT company. We base everything we do around technology. It is very important to what we do as a force multiplier to help other companies do more with their technology, to do more with their productivity. But technology can only do what's programmed to do. If a user insists on finding a way of running this executable because they want to laugh at my enormous penis, they're going to find a way. So we can put every prevention in place short of unplugging their network cable. They will find a way of running this program. So that's where user education and action becomes very important. I'm going to keep on coming back to that one. If those solutions will only do what they think they can do, what they've been programmed the match to do, what they can do within some level. If the person is intentionally circumventing those because they want to do this, those protections don't mean a thing. Don't use local admin. Shouldn't really need to be said, but do not log into your computer using a local administrator account. This removes a great deal of your protection. That it makes the attacker's life a lot easier too. So there are ways of stepping back a little bit. Local administrator rights means that you're logged into the computer as an administrative account. It means you have no restrictions on what you do. You can install programs, uninstall programs, run programs, delete stuff. You can do anything you want because you're an administrator. The computer assumes you know what you're doing. For home use, that's actually not that big a deal. But in myself, I don't run as local admin on my own computer either, or my work computer. What I have is a user level account that I do almost all of my work in, and I have a admin account on the side that prompts me. Okay, I need to do something. I'm gonna elevate my rights to a local admin or administrator account in general. Local admin means it's an administrator account on a computer. You can have domain admin and stuff on 80s on like Active Directory side or network side, but we're gonna leave that out of this because it gets confusing. So don't use local admin because when you do that, if you run that program, so if any program you run gains your rights. So if you go in and run this bad software, it's running as you. It's running as an administrator, so it can do anything to your computer at once. So that just makes attackers' jobs so much easier. So you don't want to do that. So if you don't run as an admin, it just makes their life harder. They can use a thing called privilege escalation or PrivX, where there are certain ways, certain techniques of elevating the rights of the bad guy, where they can get and use their command and control structure to run a program or to run specific code to elevate their rights to do other things. But as a rule, let's make their life hard, because we just don't want to make it easy on them there. So we'll make sure it's not on the slide there. So all these things kind of knocks the bad guy out here and gives us a good time so we can do our day. Yay! What kind comes? We'll do a quick run through here. So phishing is where we blast out a million mails and see who we can get. It is deception. It is trying to trick the person into opening our email and to taking an action. Sometimes it's going to a website. Sometimes giving us credentials. Sometimes that is running a program, or in our case, a Trojan. The dropper is a small program or an executable. In most cases, executable. It can be other things too, but let's keep it simple here. That will pull down a larger program. It doesn't always open a PDF or another website, something to hide itself, but it's a small program that pulls something bigger from somewhere else to usually do an infection or for ransomware. A remote access Trojan, or RAT, is a C2 program that gives the attacker access to a computer so they can do things like control, recon, exfiltration of data. Ransomware, we all know and love it. We all hear about it. That is where the program gets in. They run a program, they load a program, the attacker somehow goes through and encrypts all your files, or anything important at least, and then demands money. So that is a good breakdown of what we'll be seeing in the next video. So I'm really excited about this. I spent a lot of time working on this, so I'm hoping you'll like it as well. I got about a week or so in this project I have downloaded, installed, configured, and tested actual programs for this, like actual hacking tools. Most cases you only see these, you'll normally not see this because they're illegal, but in this case we're allowed to do this because it's what we do. So we will legitimately attack a computer. It's in a lab environment, of course, but I'm really excited to show you exactly how this works, how this plays through, because most people will only ever see a ransomware or this sort of thing happen if they're the victim. In this case, you're going to get to see not only the victim's view, but exactly how this attack plays out. So I'm really excited to show you that. So stay tuned. That should be coming out in the next week or so, and stay safe out there.